That's right. We're talking Eagles today on Birds 365. We did mix in a little Phillies, and our next guest talks both Eagles and Phillies. When he's podcasting his life away, doesn't matter whether it's hitting Caesar, eye on the enemy. John Stolnis is talking Philly sports. Not a bad effort out of the Phillies last night, right, Stolnis?
No, we are living right now. I'll tell you what. Talk about a team firing on. We got two teams firing on all cylinders right now. Maybe not all cylinders for the Eagles, but a lot of the cylinders. Enough of them anyway.
Yeah, the Eagles higher expectations. Amazing because the Phillies are in the middle of the run, but the Eagles got to be perfect. John Stolnis, perfect.
I know, nothing less than acceptable. Yep.
Yeah, two teams are 4-0. One of them is the Eagles, but yeah, since you went down that route, what is your biggest issue with this team so far? It could be on either side of the ball. What are you going to look at and say, you know what, this has got to get better?
Yeah, I mean, I think the offense has done enough to obviously put up the amount of yardage that they have. They've kind of figured out week to week. I think they've been great at making adjustments, seeing what defenses are doing and then not being so married to their weak script leading up to the game that they can't adjust. So I think the offense has been fine. I think we've been seeing improvement from Jalen Hurts. What worries me is the pass defense. And I know you guys were talking about some of the machinations in the secondary with the new addition, but I think that's the big worry for me right now, is because that's where I see that the talent gap is the greatest. They don't have a lot of star players or established NFL veterans in the corner slot and at safety, and they really struggle with linebackers in pass coverage, and so that's the area that I think is most troublesome. And I think this week's matchup against the Rams, especially if Cooper Kupp plays, presents a real matchup problem for this team. And that'd be my biggest area of concern, is how do they get that right?
Very legit concern. And if you just want to break it down to the stats, I'm forgetting the exact number off the top of my head, Johnny. You want to look it up quickly. The Birds are somewhere in the 20s yards.
27th in pass.
27th in pass defense. Last year, second in the National Football League. So when you drop from second to 27th out of 32
I
teams,
think they were first.
Were they first? Second
in
overall,
defense,
first in
second
passing. You're right.
overall.
Thank you. That's a pretty precipitous drop. So yes, to point at the secondary, and the Eagle defenders will say, yeah, but look at the injuries they have. True, but doesn't everybody in the National Football League have injuries? Don't you have to plug a hole basically on a week in, week out basis for your team in the National Football League? Or do you believe that you got to cut the Eagles some slack because they have had a couple significant injuries, with Maddox being the biggest of it?
I mean, when you're talking about slot cornerbacks, certainly you had to kind of factor in Avonte Maddox was going to miss some time this year, but I don't think you expected for him to miss the whole season. So there's that. And Zach McPherson getting lost late in training camp or late in the preseason certainly was what hurt. And hopefully getting, I don't know, like you guys, whether or not Bradley Roby has anything left in the tank, but I certainly feel better having an experienced veteran there. Maybe if he's playing with Slay and Bradbury, he doesn't have to be all world. He just has to be a little bit better than Bradbury in the slot with Josh Jobe on the outside. We'll see how quickly Roby can get acclimated to the defense and what Sean Desai wants to do. But I give them some leeway because they really haven't had the personnel to put together a really strong pass defense. But I think coming into the season, we knew this was a weakness. It's proving to be a weakness. I think Nicholas Morrow has been really good at certain aspects. Obviously, 3 sacks last week. I like that they're using him in blitzing schemes, but with him and Zach Cunningham in coverage, it's just a weak point in this offense. It was a weak point last year, too, even with the different personnel. Not as much of a weak point, but teams don't have to go after Slay. They don't have to go at Bradbury on the outside if they can target the middle of that field. And they've been able to do that. They've been able to get 2nd and 3s, 3rd and 2, too many easy 3rd down conversions for offenses so far. And until they can kind of get that shored up, I think I think there is some blame to go there because they came into the season knowing that was a weakness.
All right, a little devil's advocate here, John, because I agree. I don't think the passing defense has been great, but I will point out that they're generally playing from the lead or have been. So teams are going to throw more. Teams have not been able to run the ball on this team. So, part of it is you're going to have big numbers. It happened against Minnesota. It happened against Washington. Tampa Bay, they didn't do anything, but you get my point. Sometimes the game, if you're playing from the lead, if you're good, and nobody's been able, they're giving up 63 yards, I think, a game on the ground. So if you can't run it, you almost have to throw it, and that's going to manifest itself into numbers. You believe that, or is that just a positive spin?
Yeah, I think in 2 of the games, obviously, you're talking about the Vikings and the Buccaneers. That was the case. The Eagles had a pretty comfortable lead in both of those games, and especially with Minnesota, Kirk Cousins racked up a bunch of garbage time statistics. So a lot of that was there. But in week 1 against New England, that game was close pretty much the whole game. And last week against Washington, that game was back and forth the whole way. And you just look at that late drive by Sam Howell, and the fact that they weren't able to get any turnovers, any interceptions from him. Sam Howell looked really good in that game, and I don't know how much of that is Howell and Eric Bieniemy, and how much of that is the fact the Eagles just are having trouble covering people at the moment. And so it's been a mixed bag. I would say you're partially right, and I would say also that there have been times when you've needed this pass defense to do something, and they haven't been able to get it done. And we're seeing a lot of criticism with the Eagles edge rushers, and certainly that's warranted. They have not been able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. Most of it's come from the middle of the defensive line, but offensive coordinators know, attack the middle of that field to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands in just over 2 seconds, and you don't have to worry about the edge rushers. And so there's too many guys open in the middle of the field, allowing the quarterbacks to have that quick release and get rid of the football. And that's been the way you attack this Eagles defense, really going back to last year. Some offenses have been better at it than others. Sam Howell was really good with it last week, surprisingly. And we'll see what Matthew Stafford is able to do with his personnel. But that's what's scary to me, is they just get rid of that ball so fast because there's so much middle of the field that's open.
All right, before you jump in, Jody, because I want to hear both of you, because John brought up a good point. I want to bring up the scheme for this reason. Slay was on this podcast. Everybody's got a podcast. John's got a bunch of them. Jody and I have them. Slay's got his own podcast. He was getting a little criticism. He didn't have his best day. So you know how Darius is. He wants to explain what's going on. And he was explaining the cushion, because everybody hates the cushion. Cushion. They want to press. That's not what this defense is. I mean, now we have it with Gannon. Now we have it with Sean Desai. That's the belief. That's Vic Fangio. That's, make people go 13 plays, 14 plays, 15 plays. Do fans just, my thesis is fans don't like the scheme, but they're blaming the coordinator, and maybe they should.
He's got to take at least partial in it for it.
But my larger point is, they just don't like the style.
Yeah,
they don't like the style, and that's sort of the modern NFL, because the Eagles are like one of 12 teams that play this scheme. So you think it's more they got to change from the scheme, or this is what it is, and they just got to get better at it?
I would say, can we mix it up? Does it have to be one all the time or the other? Like, if you're facing a 3rd and 3 late in the game, is that the best time to give a cushion? Like, can we use can we do Vic Fangio's style of defense, which I agree, you'd rather give up a 14-play drive than a big play, make a team have to go the length of the field on you. And I'm fine with most of the time the Eagles keep the score low. I mean, they generally speaking works for them. But can there be situations where it's 3rd and 4 that maybe giving 7, 8, 10 yards of cushion in that particular instance isn't the wisest course of action? And not only that, maybe it's not possible to mix it up. Maybe you have a certain personnel grouping that it's just impossible to do both, or like 10% of the time you're playing press. And I get, you get personnel to match a scheme, and it's sometimes a square peg in a round hole. I get all that. But you can, it's like a pitcher who has to mix up his pitch arsenal. 3rd time through the order. All right, let's bring out the changeup. It's sometimes throwing a changeup every once in a while at an offense can, even if you're not that good at it, can rattle them. And so I think in a short yardage situation, especially in a big moment in the fourth quarter, when you really need to not give up anything, that in that particular instance, maybe throwing a change up in that spot would be beneficial. That's my only thing with the Vic Fangio style and playing back. Like sometimes it's not warranted. Sometimes just do something different and see if that works.
I like John's idea of just change it up once in a while, not change it drastically, but just throwing a curve every once in a while. I agree with that. Number two, Bud Slay, you came back, big guy. Okay. You can't be complaining about this. Scheme hasn't changed. You've been part of this scheme now for years, and you were out the door, got released, and then you resigned. You decided to come back here, so you can't complain. You knew what you're coming back to, okay, right. Darius? I love Slay as much as anybody, but he's always got some kind of explanation and/or excuse. So I'm not buying that a little bit. John, here's where I want to take you next. Go over the other side of the ball offense. I did this on Monday. Everything we ask about the Eagles has to be, but they're 4-0. Because we got to point out what they could still get better at. But you have to remember, most important thing, but they're 4-0. Jalen Hurts rushing, but they're 4-0. His rushing numbers are down significantly. He's on pace to have less than 500 yards. He's rushed for 750 plus both of the last 2 years. And the coaches are now actually addressing it and saying, yeah, we're telling him to protect himself. Yeah, we're telling him to get down. Yeah, we're telling him to slide, which I don't necessarily disagree with.
Right.
They have a major investment in this guy. We saw Marcus Mariota play this preseason. That would be an issue. So Jalen Hurts staying on the field is kind of important. Here's where I get a little put off. When they signed the big contract with Jalen, the coach specifically said, look right in the camera and said, when asked about Jalen's rushing, why would I take away his superpower? Well, that's exactly what you're doing. You're taking away his superpower. And it might be well advised to take away his superpower. I'm not saying you're wrong, coach, but you looked at us back in the offseason and kind of either you weren't looking far enough ahead to realize that, we might have to ask Jalen to run less, or you just flat out lied to us. It's one of the two, coach. Which is it? And is it an issue? Are they making the right decision? If we all agree that Jalen is running less, slide. When did he ever slide before? He slid a couple times already this year. He never slid before. Is this the right thing for the Eagles to do, taking away, and I'm using the coach's phrase here, not mine, Jalen's superpower?
Again, does it have to be all or nothing? And I think that's one of the issues that we're seeing with Jalen Hurts is I don't think he knows, or he hasn't gotten the feel yet of when to push it and when to get down. And I think that's part of the reason for his overall uncomfortableness in the pocket is I think he's a little unsure of taking off and running and exposing himself to contact. Now we saw in the fourth quarter during that final drive where he got pressured in the pocket and he took off and ran for 24 yards. That was great to see that it's still there.
Right.
Because he's just kind of looked slow. He's looked a little uncertain when running the football.
See, you're the second one to say that this week. He looked slow. I don't believe that for a millisecond. He looked tentative.
Yes.
There's a difference between slow and tentative. I don't think he looked slow at all. But tentative, I'll sign off on that.
And I think on that scramble, you saw it. And it was like, oh, okay, he's not slower. He still has it in there, but there was another play earlier in the game where he was outside the pocket, and all he had to do was beat like a slot cornerback to get to the outside. And instead of getting past that guy, he just went down. Like it was as if he didn't, like you said, he didn't want to initiate contact or even get involved in any contact. And he would not have taken like a strong hit from that slot corner there, but he didn't want to engage. He didn't want to engage physically with that guy. And so I wonder, are we going to see more Jalen Hurts running the football with authority, maybe when the schedule gets a little tougher, when some of these really big opponents are on the schedule, like the Niners and the Chiefs and the Cowboys, and we don't want to risk him early in the season? And I get that. If you're going to play this way, stop calling designed quarterback runs. If you don't want him to absorb any hits, then just make him a pocket passer for right now. And then if you want to unleash it in the second half of the season, when the schedule gets tougher, when we have a little bit more season behind us, I think that's an understandable philosophy. I don't think Jalen Hurts' running ability or his running are going to go away. It may be that they're going to pick and choose when they really unleash it. If that's the case, as long as they're winning games, as long as he's throwing the football effectively and the running game with the running backs is working effectively, I'm okay with Jalen Hurts playing the way he is right now. That being said, when those plays are there, like it was late in the fourth quarter, when he has to get out of the pocket and you have to get a first down, he needs to do what he needs to do to get the first down and keep the chains moving. And that's my concern, is that he's not sure when to do that. And that's affecting his decision making in the pocket. And it's one of the reasons why he's looked a little shaky so far in the first 4 games.
I like Jody's word tentative more than, I like that word to describe what's going on. It's ironic because I think Jalen Hurts, John, is, amongst it's tough to grade this, but from a perspective of being around players, he does one of the best jobs I've ever seen about closing out the outside noise.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I think it still seeps through. I think he's very cognizant. He wants to play 17 games. He wants to be out there for every single game. And I don't want to compare it to Donovan McNabb, who completely changed his philosophy to prove to goofballs that he could do something. I don't think Jalen's at that point, but I really think, missing 1 game and missing 2 games is too paramount in his mind. Like, I mean, why worry about that kind of stuff? Do you sense that, or am I off base?
Well, I mean, if they're telling him to get down and not take hits, they're putting it in his head too. Like it's not a Jalen Hurts thing. And when the coaching staff is telling you to avoid contact, to avoid taking the big hit, I mean, he took a big hit. What was it, against Tampa, where he got lit up and fumbled in that game? Or no, it was in New England. It was against New England, first game of the season, right? Where he got hammered.
Yeah, the fumble. He took a big hit in Tampa as well.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
You're going to take big hits.
Yeah.
I mean,
but that's part of playing the position, and that's part of what makes him so special. So I do agree. Like that needs to be a part of his game, and I think it will be. And I think it later in the season, he'll start to worry less, I think, about missing games. If that is a big part of his mind, how often do we say it in football? If you're worried about getting injured, you're more likely to get injured because you are going to be tentative. You are going to be uncertain, and you're going to find yourself in a position where you can get yourself hurt. So I get it. It's a hard line to walk. It's tough to find that balance. I think you want Jalen Hurts to play instinctually. The more he's thinking about it, the less effective he's going to be. And maybe it just needs to become something he gets used to, the idea of not running as much before he starts to feel comfortable with it. I think we're starting to see that. He is feeling more comfortable in the pocket. He did look better last week against the Commanders, put up big numbers passing the football, and he's got all those weapons. They got to figure out a way to get Dallas Goedert more involved in the offense. But with DeAndre Swift running the way he is, everything else, they haven't really needed Jalen Hurts' legs just yet. My guess is there will come a week when they do, and he'll run.
Speaking of DeAndre Swift, I thought he was a little underused this past week. The most questionable play they decided, and it wasn't a terrible decision. It just went absolutely nowhere. It was almost disastrous. 3rd and 11 up the middle to Kenny Gainwell. The coaching staff seems to have a confidence or a trust in Kenny Gainwell, more so than I do, because I just don't see Kenny Gainwell making plays. And yes, this is kind of a thing I can't get over. The fact that all off season, people, Kenny Gainwell was so good in the playoffs. Kenny Gainwell was very good in one playoff game. He's great against the Giants. Didn't do much against the Niners. Didn't do much more. He might have done more than Miles, but wasn't great in the Super Bowl by any stretch of the imagination. So everybody's tying that one really good game against the Giants Kenny Gainwell had to, he's the man. Are they overusing Kenny Gainwell and underusing DeAndre Swift so far?
I'll tell you what, I think they're overusing Kenny Gainwell. I don't know if they're underusing DeAndre Swift. They certainly used him a lot in that second game of the season against Minnesota, and then they used him a little bit less against Tampa. Last week, I would have probably, I think they did give up on the running game just as a whole a little bit too soon. But, Washington's got a really good front four. They were doing a pretty good job against the run. Where's Rashad Penny? Like what did he do this offseason in the summer to essentially become persona non grata here? As he even on the roster at this point, all these things about Rashad Penny, you heard his average yards per carry, and he was going to be a big part of the offense. I would rather see him get some of these non DeAndre Swift carries, because I don't want DeAndre Swift necessarily toting the ball 25 times a game. I think 16 to 20 carries a game for DeAndre Swift is a pretty good sweet spot for him. And I think he can get close to 100 yards every week if you're using him in that way. What I'd really like to see is Rashad Penny get more involved if he's effective. And if not, why is he on the roster? Let's find a different answer. Boston Scott, Boston Scott can be a guy who can soak. I trust Boston Scott more than Kenny Gainwell in certain situations. So I do think there's a fascination with Kenny Gainwell that defies logic, that defies explanation. I don't think Gainwell's a bad player. Like you said, he has had some good moments. I think he's okay as a change of pace, but man, I don't want him out there. I don't want him out there on a drive when you're trying to go tie the game, getting important carries on second and third down. You got to have your best guy out there. And right now that's DeAndre Swift. And you got to explain to me why the other two running backs on this roster are getting essentially no snaps on offense too.
Well, Boston had the concussion, so
right.
That's part of it. But yeah, he's the third. Rashad, it's pretty clear he's here in case somebody gets hurt. He's, unless somebody falls off, and if Kenny Gainwell loses that fumble, continues to play poorly, maybe they'll revisit it. But one thing, John, and this is everybody, and this maybe explains the fascination with Kenny Gainwell. He's an below average pass protector, and everybody else is awful. Pick up a blitz.
They're all bad.
Yeah.
They didn't address that this offseason.
And that's sort of a league-wide problem. There are so few backs who can pick it up. But it's funny because PFF does like 13. They rate like 13 different categories. And when they rate players, they do it by color, and red is really bad. And there's only like 3 red marks on the entire Eagles roster. And it's all pass protection from the running backs. It's unbelievable. Yeah. They've been really bad. And Rashad Penny, the one time he was in there, he was terrible. And I think that explains some of it. But Kenny's at least passable.
Yeah,
I would describe it as, and maybe that explains it. But they also like him in hurry up situations. And Rashad's not going to help you there. So it's almost like Rashad's like a good runner. He doesn't do much else. So it's hard to find a fit for him. Now, if DeAndre gets hurt and you need 20 carries from somebody, maybe that's where he gets an opportunity. But unless that happens, I don't know if people would want him out there as much, to be honest.
Yeah, and maybe not. With the running back situation as a whole, Rashad Penny was one of the first free agents they signed this offseason. They obviously saw something in him, or at least maybe there's a disagreement between Howie Roseman and the coaching staff as far as what Rashad Penny brings to the table. I don't know if that factors into it at all either. But I will say this too, and this is I've never played organized football, so I will totally take the L on this if this opinion is off the mark, and you guys can tell me if that's true or not. But if you're in the shotgun and you're a running back and you're standing next to the quarterback, how hard is it to see which linebacker or safety is coming on a blitz and just kind of get in the way for a minute? I'm sure there's a level of difficulty to picking up the blitz as a running back that is over my head, but don't you just look with your eyes and see who's coming and try to get in the way?
Those guys are coming quick, John.
I know,
and they are. And you know what? They're not asked to do it at the college level. So many are just, they're lost. And when you get, when you get a Devin White, we'll say, and his athleticism level, and you can't replicate that in practice. So it is a difficult job, but it is frustrating, when you see somebody completely miss and looking the other way. But but yeah, so they just don't do it at the college level. So
Mm.
it's not only an Eagles problem.
Yeah.
It's a league wide problem. But I would say the Eagles are really struggling with that aspect of it.
Here's where I'll agree with John, and I'll even ask him to look something up. I don't know off the top of my head how good a blocking back, picking up the blitz guy, Matt Breida is, but I know he sucked on Monday night and he almost got Daniel Jones killed. 11 sacks.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they were just
Yeah.
running free at him, and I don't remember Matt Breida even getting in the way, as you described it, John, once all time. So it is a little tricky. It's not easy.
Yeah.
We'll give him that
Sure.
much credit that it is
I take that.
a skill
Yeah.
set. And right now, the Eagles running backs are not displaying it. But hey, if they're in the red, I guarantee you Matt Breida was well in the red last week when the Giants gave up 11 sacks. You mentioned Dallas Goedert, and you're right. He hadn't had a breakout game at all. First game, one ball his way, didn't catch it. Second game, they threw it to him a lot. They threw it to him like 6 inches over the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
He had 7 catches and 22 yards, which is almost hard to do. Make 7 and then so few yards that he did. What's the difference? Is it scheme? Is it Goddard? Is it Hurts? The results have just been almost non-existent.
Hey, good call, by the way, Jody. He was in the red.
He was. I know. I watched the game. I watched Daniel Jones get hit after time after time after time.
I wanted to give you your props. I'm
Thank you
sorry for interrupting.
And I just want to cut the Eagles running backs a little bit of slack. They're not the only running backs in the league who can't pick up a blitz. There are a whole bunch of them, as John pointed out. They don't teach it in college anymore. So why do you even ask them to do it on the pro level? I was asking you, John, Dallas Goedert, much reduced production. What's the biggest reason?
You know, it's a great question. I think if the Eagles knew why, they would probably be getting him the ball a little bit more. I just think AJ Brown has been so productive in a lot of the ways that Dallas Goedert over the middle. He's been making a lot of plays, but the Eagles last couple of weeks have been kind of focused on stretching the field a little bit, and they've had a lot of success with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith down the field. I think, you watch these games and, you look back at the all 22 and they're just not on the same page, Jalen Hurts and Dallas Goedert. And I don't know if that's a product of the play calling, the new offensive coordinator. Just sometimes you get into a funk with one of your guys and Dallas thinks we're going to go left and Jalen kind of wants to lead him a little bit to the right. And you're just missing. You're just not connecting. And to be fair, Jalen Hurts, I don't think was terribly sharp the first couple weeks of the season. I think a lot of this is probably on Jalen. I think Dallas has been open. I think Jalen's missed him on a few occasions. I think Jalen has been focusing on getting the ball to his star wide receivers. And why wouldn't you? Those guys usually win their matchups. And I think we saw, especially in the Vikings game, but we've seen a lot of teams drop a lot of guys into coverage and kind of blanket the middle of the field. And so there hasn't been a ton of space for Dallas Goedert to work. I think there's a number of different issues here. Again, you take what the defense gives you. The defense has been giving the Eagles room to run the football, and they've been giving the Eagles room to go over the top with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I think Dallas Goedert will get his at a certain point this season. But for whatever reason, it's just not there right now. Again, you can't complain too much. I mean, this team's putting up 350, 400 yards of offense every week. If it's not there, it's not there.
Yeah, we've had that discussion a bunch, John, because they have 2 new coordinators. So, we've asked that question of a number of guests. Who do you think has done a better job? And I think it's mainly been Desai. And I got to tell you, I'm impressed by Brian Johnson. I might be the only one. But you kind of explained why when you're talking about, all right, sometimes change it up on defense. And I think Sean does more of that than Jonathan Gannon. But I think Brian, and we alluded to it, the Minnesota game, they got 6-man boxes, run the football. Washington, you mentioned A.J. Brown. They got that poor Emmanuel Forbes on A.J. Brown. Just throw him the football. The poor kid had to delete his social media because people were so vicious to him, which I do not advocate.
Yeah.
But here's the numbers right now. Now, it's not a large sample size. You're a baseball guy, so statistically, but it's starting to get more meaningful. They're 5th in total offense, 2nd in rushing offense, obviously, but they're 12th in passing offense, 5th in points per game. ninth and third down offense, seventh and fourth down offense. They're top 10 in everything except red zone. They kind of bog down in the red zone, which is fair. I think he's doing a good job. Now, he's got tremendous talent, but the reason why is because, all right, what I said, Brian Flores gave me 6-man boxes. I'm just going to run it down his throat. Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio are putting a rookie on A.J. Brown. I'm just going to keep chucking it to him. I think that's good coaching.
Yeah, and Eagles last week scored a touchdown on their opening drive, so obviously he had a good offensive game plan scripted for the first drive. They've made really good second half adjustments this year, and I think last year they were a big second quarter team. This year I think they've been a big third quarter team, and they've really adjusted really well to what defenses' unique looks they've been getting thrown at them. So, and I think he's actually called an egoless game for the Eagles here through the first 4 games. I mean, to just kind of put your creativity aside, every offensive coordinator wants to put his stamp on things. Oh, look at this play call, look at this unique design, look at all. Instead, no, if we just put the ball in DeAndre Swift's belly and let him run, we're going to win this football game, and just go ahead and do that. So I think he's been good. I think he's had some play calls where you scratch your head, which not surprising. The red zone struggles are definitely something that needs to get cleaned up. That's probably the biggest weakness for him right now, is knowing what personnel to use in the red zone and how to get the ball into the end zone from inside the 20. They're getting a lot of touchdowns from outside the 20, but when they're settling for too many field goals here. And there's just been some sloppiness, generally speaking, with the offensive line giving up some sacks, some penalties here and there, a whole bunch of different things. I think on the whole, I'd probably give him like a B- so far for his job as an offensive coordinator. And if you consider it's his first 4 games, you want to grade him on a curve, I could even see a B grade for Brian Johnson so far. I think he's done fine.
All right, I'm going to give you a chance to play Howie Roseman for a second here, John, okay?
All right.
Trade deadline coming up in 3 weeks and change. Let's say Les Snead, the general manager of the Rams, has some kind of brain aneurysm. And he calls you and says, listen, I'll offer you Puka Nacua for Keely Ringo, who was drafted before Nacua was in this past year's draft. No upside, no everything. We know production to this point. One is second in the NFL in receiving. The other one is can't get on the field in the National Football League. Redo that deal for the Eagles for their third wide receiver?
Sure. I think absolutely. I mean, I think, especially in the secondary, they obviously like Josh Jobe. They obviously have other guys, you can play at safety. I think that whatever position Keely Ringo would end up playing here in his NFL career, I think the Eagles have some options there, some other guys that they really like, and this kid for the Rams looks like he's a real deal. I mean, it's kind of surprised that they've needed him with Cooper Kupp out, but Nacua to play the way he has through the first 4 weeks. It's one of the reasons the Rams are 2-2, and they actually could be 3-1. I mean, they've actually, the offense has been better than I think anybody would have expected. I talked to one of the writers for SB Nation's Rams site, Turf Show Times, and he was very pessimistic about this team coming into the season. Overly pessimistic. I was surprised how down on his own team he was. But so it's just and so they've looked better than I think anybody thought that they were going to look. Sean McVay's done a good job, and I think Nacua is one of the reasons why. So I'm doing that deal because I with Quez and Zacchaeus has played pretty well in the time that he's made a couple of plays, but Nacua has so much upside. You put him on the field with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Oh boy,
I would do get the ball. This is what I said to Jody yesterday, and you just mentioned it, John. They can't even get Dallas Goedert the ball. He's here. He doesn't touch the ball. You don't even know who he is if he's here. One of the major things is he's gotten an opportunity, by the way, with a high volume throwing quarterback as well. If he was here, you wouldn't even know who he is. Not to say he might eventually turn into a player, but he's not A.J. Brown, despite his numbers. He's not Devontae Smith. He's not Dallas Goedert. And as I said, they can't get the ball to Dallas Goedert and yet. I think they will eventually. You don't even know who he is on this team. So part of it is it's not a vacuum. He's not going to step in here and catch 50 passes because he's not going to have the same opportunities. And part of it is Slay's age, Bradbury's age. Long term, they need outside cornerbacks. And yeah, do they like Job? Do they like Eli Ricks? Yeah. But if they were the bet on one of the three at this point, they'd still bet on Ringo being the best of that group. I think Ringo's a good bet for an Eagles team because he's a developmental player that they might need 1 or 2 years down the line. Nakua is a good fit for a Rams team that needs receivers and high octane, passing offense with Matthew Stafford. But they're not a good team. 20-point score on a bad NBA team. That's how I describe it.
Here's the only thing you're not factoring in, John. We're one turned ankle on A.J. Brown.
Well,
from Quez Watkins being the number 2 wide receiver on his team.
And I don't like that. And I don't like that.
Then you got to protect yourself against that. You got to have a safety net. And Puka Nakua is my safety net as my 3rd wide receiver.
Yeah, but then we're also got to point out, why would Les Snead do that? He wouldn't. He wouldn't have a brain
I said he'd have to have a brain aneurysm to do it. I'm just saying Howie passed on him last year. Everybody else passed on him all the way till the 5th round too. I'm not just calling Howie on the carpet. It's one of those. Yeah. How the hell did Reed Blankenship go undrafted? How did Puka Nakua get to the 5th round? I'm just pointing out if Howie had the chance via a brain aneurysm to correct the draft pick, would he do it?
My point is that roster building is a science, and role players are role players. Like, would I want a Pro Bowl level guard to step in for Cam Jurgens this week against Aaron Donald? Yes. Is that realistic? No, because you can't have that type of player stashed on your bench. And if you do, he's going to immediately be moving on or going in a different direction, or he's going to beat out the player. You can't have an all-star. You can't just assemble, okay, this guy's better than this guy and get the 53 best players. Yeah. Mo Williams was a running back when I covered the Vikings. People may remember him or not remember him, but I think it was Mike Tice who told me, the old saying, he's not the first one, but he said it about Mo Williams. You can't win with 53 Mo Williams, but you can't win without one of them. You need role players. You need role players. And Calais Ringo, by the way, for people disappointed in him, he's been a heck of a special teams player. And Michael Clay brought him up as one of the reasons why Britton Covey has improved. In punt returns, he's been a good gunner as well. I think they're happy with Calais Ringo, but I think, that's boring. Special teams is boring stuff. But yeah, I mean, you could always go down. I think Aaron Donald, since it's Aaron Donald week, I think it was the 13th pick in the draft. So if you revisit, 12 teams made a stinking mistake. I'll tell you that right off the bat.
Well, John, you say all the time here, how the hell did the National Football League let Carter drop down to number 9? Happens all the time.
Yeah,
well,
happens all the time.
You don't have a problem pointing out the other teams that made mistakes to allow the Eagles to do well, but you're going to give the Eagles a pass for not taking a guy.
No, my point. I'm not giving him. But I'm saying he does not even play on this team. So what is the point?
Ringo.
Yes, he does. He plays significant. Again, nobody cares about special teams.
Add the stats together. Who do you think plays more if they got Puka Nakua next week? If he's going in as the 3rd wide receiver, who plays more? Keely Ringo in his special team snaps, or Puka Nakua as their 3rd wide receiver?
Keely Ringo plays more because he's a 4 guy just by number of reps. The 3rd receiver on this team gets no stinking traffic. You'd be ripping Puka Nakua on this team, Jody McDonald, because he wouldn't do a goddamn thing on this team unless somebody got hurt and maybe he turns into the same player he is, and then you'd realize it. I'm not saying that, but he would not play on this team, period. He wouldn't play. So what's the point? Am I crazy, John? He's not playing on this team. Every situation is not the same.
Jody, I think John convinced me. I do. No, I hear what you're saying about the role players, and we were talking about having a running back who can pick up a blitz, or when we were looking at slot receiver, Zach Pascal was one of those guys that did a lot of the blocking dirty work last year, and that was one of the things. Like, oh, did they get a guy who can replace Zach Pascal doing that kind of work? Is Zacchaeus a guy who can do that kind of thing? So those are the role type players that we're talking about, and I think those guys are important. I will say I think Nakua is going to probably have a better pro career than Ringo, but it's too early to say for sure. So it's an interesting question. I think I'm leaning. I initially was siding with you, Jody, but I think John convinced me a little bit.
Then
all right.
I hope for both of your cases,
AJ
AJ Brown or Devontae Smith never turns an ankle. Because when
Same.
Quez is asked to step up in a big spot this year, I'll be thinking of Puka Nakua. And it's all just a hypothetical question. And I know it takes off the whole streaming world whenever I do this and ask hypothetical. They're not getting Puka Nakua, so it's all just thinking through several mental football steps. But I'd like to have a better third wide receiver option than what the Eagles have right now. That's my main point. All right, John, do the Eagles get to 5-0 this week and beat the Rams in LA?
Yeah, I can't pick the Eagles against the Eagles right now. I can't pick the Eagles. I can't pick against the Eagles the way they've been playing. I mean, they're doing what they need to do. This team they're winners, man. I mean, despite all the noise and all the problems that they have, unlike any Eagles team we've ever seen, they find a way to win every single week. Like they are a group that figures it out, and they will figure it out against the Rams. I think they're going to be able to put some points on the board. If Cooper Kupp comes back, we might see a big Cooper Kupp game, but the Eagles are usually able to overcome stuff like that. So yeah, I think they beat Los Angeles and go to 5-0.
All right. So you got them 5-0, close, hanging the balance. Do they need the special teams player of the week to get it done for them late again? Jake just keeps racking up these special team player of the week awards.
Yeah, they'll need Jake, but I think it'll be something along the lines of like a 27-23. So yeah, I think it'll be pretty close.
All right, we kept you too long, so I apologize that you had to hear my rant. But at John Stolnis, make sure you follow John on Twitter. You're right, you're a baseball guy, so 2 questions to end it. Phillies have a chance against the Braves, and the Eagles are 21-1, 957 winning percentage. That's pretty good as a baseball guy, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, if I could break out an Excel spreadsheet for you on that, but I think that sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Phillies Braves though. You got a shot?
I think the Phillies win it in 5. I do.
Oh.
I do. I think they're playing as well, if not better, than any team in baseball right now. And you look at the rosters, they match up against the Braves better than anybody.
Johnny, always a pleasure, brother. We appreciate whatever you jump in. We'll get you back up in a couple of weeks.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John.
That is John Stolnis here on Birds 365.
In 5, they're going to dominate, according to John.
Who? The
Phillies. He picked the Phillies in 5.
Series.
Yeah.
It's not a 7-game series. This is best of 5. So if you win in 5,
that's John. He said win in 5. Yeah, 3-2. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not paying attention to baseball, Johnny.
And I give you one other one you kind of missed out on. Olamide Zacchaeus' snaps as compared to Kaylee Ringo's snaps this week, 61-25. Olamide. So the third wide receiver does play a lot more than a guy who's even a core 4 special teamer gets on the field. That's why.
They did. They played 91% 11 personnel last week, which is a high. But yeah, maybe I overstated that point of it. But the larger point, which I didn't get with John, but I got with you, they want the trade. They want to trade on the field to help AJ and Devontae. And one guy runs 4.3, the other guy runs 4.6. That trait is not there. I can't make you go my direction with, it's not about just assembling. Is Puka Nakua a better receiver than Quez Watkins? I'm with you 100%. I'm with you 100%. It's not just about 1, 2, 3. He's a better receiver. It's about how do you make things easier for AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, because those are your guys. Those are your traffic guys. The third receiver, whether it's Quez Watkins or Olamide Zacchaeus or Puka Nakua, they're getting scraps. they're getting scraps in this offense unless those two guys aren't on the field. Their job is to make things easier for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And that's why, and we'll see this week because Quez was a full participant yesterday, so he should be back. And if Olamide's pushing him, in theory, Olamide has been more productive, but I think they're going back to Quez Watkins for the reason I stated. They're trying to make things easier when it comes to spacing and manipulating the defense for the two star receivers. It's not just about, you go get Adam Thielen, who's 33 years old. He's better than all of them, but he's not a fit on this team. I can throw 100 receivers out there that are better than Quez Watkins. It's not necessarily a fit on the Philadelphia Eagles. That's all I'm trying to say.
John, I completely understand both yours and what you're portraying as the Eagles' philosophy. Here's where I get off the boat. If I'm a defensive coordinator going against the Philadelphia Eagles, if I'm a defensive secondary player going against the Philadelphia Eagles, am I worried about Quez Watkins and his 4.4 inch? Make him a 4.2 speed guy. Yeah,
4.3.
okay, or whatever you want to call him.
No, but you said this.
I'm not going to worry about him. I'm going to dare Jalen Hurts to throw the ball to Quez Watkins instead of A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. Yeah, please have at it, Jalen.
I remember you saying that last year. You just let him go. Just let him run by the defense. You're going to get fired if you just let him go, because he's already had, a 99-yard reception where he didn't get in. He's had long touchdowns. He can run by people. And if you're a defensive coordinator and you say that, I'm not going to pay attention to Quez Watkins, all of a sudden he runs by you and you get the big play.
You understand? I'm not speaking literally, right?
Well, I mean that's what I'm saying. You have to account for him. That's my whole point. It is hyperbole to say don't pay attention. You have to account for him. That's what he adds to this team. That the fact that you don't want to, you prefer to put all the attention on AJ and Devontae Smith, but you can't, and it makes it more difficult. And as you condense things, and to a larger, maybe a better example of my point would be when we were at Bijan 365, and I tried to explain to people. Now, Bijan's a phenomenal talent. I'm not going to say he's not better than DeAndre Swift or any other running back that they could bring in here, but he's not. You don't need him on this team. They have trouble getting to the football, to the playmakers. It's not fantasy football. We can't get the football on the Philadelphia Eagles to Dallas Goedert, who's a star tight end. There's only one football. Now, if you lose A.J. Brown down the road and you want to go about it a different way, but there's only so much to go around. And the Eagles have literally last season, 10 of the 11 players on offense were either all pros, Pro Bowl selections, or at worst Pro Bowl alternates. Excuse me, it was 9 out of 11. I'm counting Dallas because Dallas wasn't, because he missed 5 games. That's the only reason he wasn't.
Right.
So it was 10 out of 11. Number 11 was Quez Watkins. Is he a good player? No. Is he an average player? And John brought up Zach Pascal too. They guess what? They'd like to have Zach Pascal. They would. They would.
Are you counting Miles in that group?
Yeah, Miles made the Pro Bowl last year.
Okay, so they let a Pro Bowl running back walk away.
Yeah, he made the Pro Bowl. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl because of Jalen Hurts, because of the offensive line, but he made the Pro Bowl. But that's a perfect example of fit as well. Check out Miles' numbers in Carolina this year versus Miles' numbers in Philadelphia.
Right.
Puka's not having the same numbers here conversely, as he's having in Los Angeles, mainly because of the opportunity. Would he be the third best receiver on this team? I'm 100% with you, Jody.
Right.
He would be the third best receiver.
That's my point. If you have a chance to get an upgrade, even though it's not theoretically as good a fit as Quez is, because that's all it is theoretically, because Quez doesn't actually catch all that many balls over the top and score touchdowns when everybody is so worried about A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, as they should be. Yeah, I'm talking about improving a third wide receiver over your third defensive back who can't get on the field, but is a pretty good special teams player. That to me would be an upgrade of the overall roster and give the Eagles a better chance to win. All right, we went real long. Quickie timeout, come back, more Birds 365.